Today we're living in a culture that is absolutely terrified of death. We've built ourselves these mini empires. We try to accumulate wealth. We try to accumulate stuff so that we can do everything within our human power to avoid the thought of death. Even now, there are people working on technology and various medical advancements to try to prolong human life, to try to bring about immortality, really. And so the question is, why are we so scared? Why are we so scared of death? And even as Christians, most people that I talk to who follow Christ, who believe in life after death, who believe in the resurrection of the dead, tend to shy away from the subject of death. And it's concerning to me. And it's concerning to me because I think that, especially here in Western culture, where we are trained to think about life as this never-ending process of accumulating and growing and building, it can be very easy for Christians to slip into the quote-unquote American dream mindset as well. And this is dangerous. It's very dangerous because it's not biblical. And actually, one of my concerns with some of the forms of postmillennialism is that it seems to manifest in a way that focuses attention on advancement in this world, so much so that it doesn't recognize that there still is a disconnect between the political structures of this world and the spiritual kingdom of heaven in which we are brought into through Jesus Christ. And while there is continuity, this world is not being thrown away. This world is not useless or to be destroyed and rebuilt. There is still an emphasis that right now, we as Christians are in somewhat of a wilderness period. We are wandering in the wilderness amongst people, amongst nations that do not love the Lord, that do not serve the Lord. And these nations are acting as though they are God and that this is all there is. And we're living in such a secular society right now, probably one of the most secular societies that this world has ever seen, that we have gotten to a point where we're not even acknowledging quote-unquote pagan deities anymore. All we're acknowledging is the self. This is it. We are all there is. This material world is all there is. And once you die, you stay dead. End of story. And so people, in pursuit of avoiding the natural consequence, which is once you die, you stay dead, seek to create a sense of eternality in the here and now, divorced from God, divorced from the spiritual world. So as I said at the start of this video, you see people that are very much, they're pursuing, looking for retirement, looking for building up multiple assets, building up multiple streams of income, trying to save to make sure their family is prepared. And this mentality, if we're not careful as Christians, can lead us into a pattern where we are starting to think about things in terms of the here and now and not in terms of the eternal, the things that really matter. And the reality is, brothers and sisters, yes, the sting of death is gone in Jesus Christ. But death is still a reality that all of us face. All of us. I'm going to die. You are going to die. And all too often, we begin to slip into a mentality where we don't think about that. And so I want to use this video, as morbid as it sounds, to encourage us to meditate on death, to meditate on our own death, to meditate on our mortality, the fact that this world is passing away, and with it, our bodies are passing away. I could die tomorrow. I could die tonight in a car accident as I'm driving somewhere. We never know when death is going to come. We never know when family that we love and we cherish, when they will be gone either. Death is such a visceral, real reminder of this world's fallen state and the fact that the consummation of Christ's kingdom has not yet arrived. And we as Christians do no good by not talking about it, by not thinking about it. Because when we live in a world that pushes it off to the side and creates empires to try to disguise the fact that we're mortal, we end up not advancing in the pursuit of showing the world the necessary urgency of the gospel. The gospel has an urgency about it precisely because we will all die. And so when we fall line and step with the culture, where we're just going through the motions of our job, saving our money, buying homes, all of that, with no thought or a disconnect between our spiritual life and our quote-unquote societal life, when we place a disconnect like that, it is a terrible testimony to the rest of the world. The world needs to know that they're going to die. Humanity needs to know that all of us have an end date known in the mind of God, when our time on this earth and these corruptible bodies will expire and we will be put 6 feet under the ground. This is reality, brothers and sisters. And even now, as I say that to you, as I remind you that you may die tonight, you may feel uncomfortable. I certainly do. You know, I've never really been scared of my own death, but I've been scared of losing people that I love in death. My wife, I think about all the time. Whenever she leaves for work, I always just pray, Lord, protect her as she drives. I'm scared if I were to go, how other people would react, my absence, how that would affect my wife, my family, my friends. And yet, this is reality. When the disciples ask Jesus in Matthew 24, when will be the end of the age? And Jesus says about that day and hour, no one knows. He then goes into a discussion not about the end of the age, but about us as individuals keeping watch, for we know not when the thief in the night is going to come. And he's when he comes, whether at the end of the age or to us in death, we want to be found faithful. We want to be found awake. We want to be found doing the things of the kingdom, thinking about the things of the kingdom, pursuing the advancement of Christ's kingdom. We don't want to be asleep, caught in the cares of this world, caught in the lies that this is what matters. There can't not be a disconnect between what we're doing here and what we are thinking about eternally. And if there is, there's a problem. So let me ask you this question. How often do you think about your own death? Momento Mori, how often do you meditate on your death? Chances are most of you say, well, not that often. Some of you might even say, I don't. I try to keep it out of my head. And the question is, if you keep your death out of your head, how does that impact the way that you live? How does that impact the way that you live day to day? Are you thinking about the future in terms of this definite thing? Especially you young people that are watching this. Maybe you're in college right now. Maybe you're getting ready to go into college. Maybe you're in my camp and you're in your mid to late 20s and you're still thinking about a good chunk of life ahead. Are you thinking about this as a definite thing? Because it's not. It's not. Life can be gone like that. So the question is not, should we be thinking about the future? I'm not trying to discourage that, but we need to be thinking about the future in context. And when we recognized our own mortality, we recognize that we will die and we don't know when, the way we think about the future, the way we plan for the future is going to be different. It's not going to be carnal, if you will. Because all too often when we disconnect thinking about and meditating on our death from our plans for the future, we end up inadvertently disassociating the spiritual world from the physical world. We end up divorcing the two of those things and only thinking about things in terms of a carnal, human, secularist agenda for the American dream, or whatever you want to call it if you're in a different place in the world. You see, what our death does is it grounds us in reality. It reminds us of who we are in relation to God. And as a result, it reminds us that the time that we do have on earth, though we don't know how long it's going to be, that it must be rooted in Him, because at the end of the day, we want to be found faithful. We want to be found thinking about eternity. I was listening to a sermon by Father Josiah Trenum, an Eastern Orthodox priest, and he was talking about some of this Momento Mori type practice. And one of the things he pointed out was that in Scripture, Christ warns against drunkenness, adultery, and being weighed down by the cares of the world. It's really interesting that you have these three things paired together as elements that will keep us from the kingdom. So he talks about, stay awake, keep watch. Then he talks about adultery, drunkenness, and being weighed down by the cares of this world, or the cares of life. And what's interesting about that is most of us would run from things like adultery, things like drunkenness, or things that are very obviously sinful. But how many of us are very conscious? This was Father Josiah's point. How many of us are actually conscious about avoiding being bogged down by the cares of this life and seeing that as a very threat to our souls? Many of us don't. Many of us don't. And so the point of this video is not to try to be morbid about death, right? Death is an entrance into life for the Christian. Therefore, we have no fear in death, as the great hymn says. But the reality is, by meditating on our death, it actually grounds us deeper into reality itself. Rather than pull us from reality where we have to go, oh my gosh, nothing's certain. It grounds us in reality and tells us what is certain. And what is certain is that nothing in this world divorced from Jesus Christ is certain. So therefore, in all that we do, let it be to the glory of God. Because when our time comes, for me it might be tonight, might be 20 years from now, might be 50 years from now, I don't know. But when that time comes, I want to be able to reflect on my life and know that every moment of my life was preparing for the moment of my death. To be found faithful, to be found in service to Christ, to be found in all that I do here to the glory of His name, not my own, not my legacy, not any sort of care of this world, but for His name and His name alone. So as we look around at a world that is terrified of death, that doesn't like thinking about death, that wants to avoid anything to do with death, we as Christians need to elevate death. We need to think about death. We need to recognize that death is the marking of what is real in this world. And that it's going to happen to all of us. Death marks out the stark reality that our world tries so hard to suppress. That we are sinners before God, and the wages of sin is death, and we all have to face death. But thanks be to God, as St. Paul says, for we have been snatched from the jaws of death by Jesus Christ our Lord. And so those of us who are of faith, death is not a scary reality. Death is a glorious, glorious reality. Now dying, that's a scary thing to think about sometimes. But death itself is not scary at all. For death is entrance into the greatest fullness of life that we could ever possibly imagine. And so my prayer for you through this video is that you would actively meditate on your death as a means to ground you in reality, so that as you think about your life and your future, which is uncertain, You would think about it in terms of eternity. You would think about it in terms of Christ's kingdom, and the work that you would do is focused on what is real, what is going to happen, what is lasting and eternal, and what has value. Don't go after the things of this world. Don't go after and be weighed down by the thoughts and desires of the world. Instead, be consumed with the mission that Christ has given us and allow that to transform you and transform your view of death. Thanks for watching that video. If you like the work that I do, please consider becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month and signing up for my email newsletter. It's free. Both of those things can be found in the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching.